to Brian McLaren's book, We Make the Road by Walking. In the first chapter, his first chapter of Lent, he begins with these words. Imagine yourself in Galilee, in a wind-swept hillside near a little fishing town called Capernaum. Flocks of birds circle the land. Wildflowers bloom among the grasses between rock outcroppings. The Sea of Galilee glistens blue below us, reflecting the clear midday sky above. A small group of disciples circles around a young man who appears to be about 30. He is sitting, as rabbis in this time and culture normally do. Huge crowds extend beyond the inner circle of disciples, in a sense eavesdropping on what he is teaching them. This is the day they've been waiting for. This is the day Jesus is going to pass on to them the heart of his message. And Jesus begins in a fascinating way. He uses the term blessed to address the question of identity, the question of who we want to be. In Jesus' day, to say, blessed are these people, is to say, pay attention. These are the people you should aspire to be like. This is the group you want to belong to. It's the opposite of saying, woe to those people, or cursed are those people, which means, take note, you definitely don't want to be like those people or counted among their number. His words, no doubt, surprised everyone. And his words are found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And it goes like this. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to the whole house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your God in heaven. McLaren continues, Jesus has been speaking for only a matter of seconds, and he's already turned our normal status ladders and social pyramids upside down. He advocates an identity characterized by solidarity, sensitivity, and nonviolence. He celebrates those who long for justice, who embody compassion and manifest integrity and non-duplicity. He creates a new kind of hero, not warriors or corporate executives or politicians, but brave and determined activists for preemptive peace, willing to suffer with him in the prophetic tradition of justice. McLaren says our choice is clear from the start. If we want to be Jesus' disciples, We won't be able to simply coast along and conform to the norms of our society. We must choose a different definition of well-being, a different model of success, a new identity with a new set of values. It's hot in the Galilean sunshine. Still, the crowds are hanging on Jesus' every word, because they can tell something profound and life-changing is happening within them and among them. Jesus is not simply trying to restore their religion to some ideal state of the past, nor is he agitating unrest to start a new religion to compete with the old one. No, it's abundantly clear that he's here to start something bigger, something deeper, something more subversive, a global uprising that can spread to and through every religion and every culture. This uprising begins not with a new strategy, but with a new identity. So he spurs his hearers into reflection about who they are, who they want to be, what kind of people they will become, what they want to make of their lives. This is how we begin Lent, with the question, who are we? Who do we want to be? Who are we becoming as individuals, as a community, as a country, as a people of God? Who are we becoming? Jesus began the Sermon on the Mount by shaking things up, by getting people's attention with the Beatitudes, blessed are. And the people Jesus claimed as blessed were not the people that society declared as blessed. Blessed was not about status or wealth or power, as many in Jesus' time and many in our time would define being blessed. Blessed were the people unafraid to show compassion, are those unafraid to offer forgiveness of self and others. Blessed are the people willing to face ridicule and harm for bringing light to oppression and injustice and cruelty. Blessed were the people who worked for peace and justice and reconciliation. Blessed are those whose life was given to something greater than themselves. That's how Jesus begins this sermon. And then he goes on to challenge people to be light, to help guide their community into a new way of living and being, to shine their light into the community, to stop hiding, even from themselves, to stop hiding who they can be and who they can become. The beginning of this Sermon on the Mount. There's a story, a great story that I heard years back. I don't know if it's true. It's a story that gets told, though, by lots of preachers. We don't always tell true stories. But it's a great story about standing on the Word of God, and it goes like this. It's the story of an acolyte during a Sunday morning worship. It's a young boy, probably about third grade, and it's his very first time acolyting. He walked down the center aisle. I actually can picture our acolytes as I was reading over the story. Walked down the center aisle of the sanctuary, very proud, adorned in his white acolyte robe, palms sweating just a bit, but a big smile on his face. He was by himself, and he's very proud of this responsibility. So as he approached the altar, if you were paying attention, you'd notice that his smile faded just a little bit. This young boy wasn't especially tall for his age. Actually, he was pretty short. And as he drew near to the altar, he realized that the candles had been changed. When he practiced, they were short, old, burned-down candles. But now it's Sunday morning, and it's his first time acolyting, and they are tall, brand-new candles. He was still pretty proud, pretty confident, so he walked up to the first candle, and he reached his candle lighting stick as high as it could go, and he couldn't reach it. So he walked over to the other candle, and he reached as high as he could go, and he still couldn't reach it. So he looked to the pastor for help, but the pastor had his face buried in his sermon, which never happens here, and he wasn't paying attention to the acolyte. So the young boy looked around. The congregation started to get a little antsy. You could hear the rustling. And then the boy smiled. And you could see in his eyes that he had an idea. He knew what to do. The boy had spotted the big Bible on the altar. See, you already know where I'm going. And if you've ever been to the church where it's one of those really old, big, traditional Bibles that sits on the altar, it's about 3 feet tall, it seems like. So the boy carefully takes his candle lighting stick and puts it in the holder, keeping the flame lit. And he goes to the altar and he picks up the Bible and he folds it up and he puts it down right in front of the altar. And he grabs his acolyte stick and he steps on the Bible and he lights the candles. Smile on his face. And he extinguishes the flame and he puts the candlestick back and he picks up the Bible and he unfolds it and he puts it back on the altar. And he takes a seat and he is proud. Well, by now the minister's paying attention. Because by now he's heard the gasps coming from the congregation as the kid picked up the Bible and stood on it. So the acolyte's sitting down and the pastor steps into the pulpit, and I imagine it's one of those moments where the entire congregation is dead silent, and everyone's waiting to see how the pastor's going to respond. The pastor gets in the pulpit and he says, "Now that's what I call standing strong on the Word of God." I like this pastor. And every time I hear that story, I realize that so much of life is about perspective. Have you ever noticed that? For the most part, how we choose to look at situations and events in our lives will determine how we experience them. Not always, but often. No doubt there were some congregation members in that story horrified that this little child stood on the Bible. Others might have been amused. I would guess most were waiting to take their lead from the pastor. Life is about perspective. We can choose to be blessed. We can choose to be a blessing. We can choose to find the good in life situations and to bring good to life situations. We can choose to be in a relationship with God or not. We can choose to stand strong on the Word of God even when it breaks some of our expectations. It's a choice we get to make. And there was a study conducted a few years back by a couple professors. Dr. Robert Emmons, who was a professor of psychology at the University of California, Davis, and Professor Michael McCullough of the University of Miami. And this whole study was to determine the effects of intentional gratitude. Intentional gratitude. So they split up the people into 3 separate groups. In the first group, they instructed to focus on the things in their daily life that they were grateful for. The second group was supposed to focus on all the hassles and the frustrations throughout their day. And the third group was just supposed to focus on the things that happened, the daily events. And they were supposed to journal each night. What were they grateful for? What had they been frustrated by? And what happened? What group would you have wanted to be in? I wouldn't have wanted to be in that middle group. But as you might suspect, by the end of the study, the people in this first group were more optimistic, more enthusiastic, they were more joyful. And what they also found was that the people in this first group, they had fewer illnesses. They got more sleep. They exercised more. They were more energetic, and they were more likely to have helped someone during the day. The people who were intentionally grateful during their days were happier, healthier people. Recognizing the blessings in our life helps us to live happier, healthier, more meaningful lives. For many, the Sermon on the Mount is the most important teaching of Jesus. The main point to all of his parables and his ministry, the main message of his life. Be blessed. Don't strive for greatness above others, or wealth in spite of others, or power over others. Know that you are blessed by God and be grateful, because a meaningful life comes to us when we focus first on God. And Jesus taught his followers what it meant to be blessed and what it meant to live that blessing. Because to be blessed isn't a passive thing, it was an active thing. When you were blessed, you lived that out. Jesus' understanding of blessing, was sourced in his Jewish heritage. He identified blessed as a way of life, an attitude, an action, a responsibility, an experience with God, a relationship with God and with others. And he encouraged people to recognize their blessing and to live that out in community. And if you read through the Gospels, much of Jesus' ministry was devoted to teaching others how to be a blessing, how to be an agent of transformation in the world, present to the moment, interconnected with all of life. If you listen to Jesus' teaching in the Beatitudes and in the whole of the Sermon on the Mount, he isn't talking about some future time, live like this later. He isn't talking about what's to come. He's talking about now. How to live in the moment, how to interact and relate to others today, how to be in relationship with God now. To be blessed is based on how you are living your everyday life, who you are choosing to be. Do we choose to live as a blessed people, present to God and to each other? There was one aspect of this study that I found fascinating, and I wonder if you caught it. That first group, the ones who focused on their gratitude, they were more likely to have helped someone else. Being grateful for and in our lives means we're more likely to help others. And I find it fascinating, and it actually reminds me of the greatest commandment that Jesus taught, to love God, to love our neighbor as ourselves. When we start with loving God and live out that blessing, we love others as well. McLaren says, the uprising begins not with a new strategy, but with a new identity. So Jesus spurs his hearers into reflection about who they are, who they want to be, what kind of people they will become, and what they want to make of their lives. Who they plan to be, who they want to be. Lent is that invitation for us to decide, who are we, who do we want to be? And it's a journey. You're probably familiar with the phrase that says something like, the road is laid out before us, or we get to choose which path we take. Instead of thinking of Lent as a road, or a journey already laid out before us, inviting us to walk an established path, I want to invite you to think of Lent a little differently this year. I'll tell you, I was first drawn to McLaren's book simply because of the title, We Make the Road by Walking. The road is not laid out in front of us. It isn't already established. It hasn't already been formed. We make the road. We decide whether or not to walk the Lenten journey. And as we walk it, the road forms behind us, not in front of us. We choose what to bring with us, and we choose what to leave behind. This year's Lenten journey is a blank slate. The path is undetermined at the moment. And the journey begins with the question of who we are, who we want to become, what identity do we claim for ourselves, for the St. Luke's community. And Jesus invites us to claim an identity of blessed. It's an invitation to a different kind of life, perhaps a different kind of path than we've walked before. It might be unfamiliar terrain or unforeseen twists and obstacles, but Jesus reminds us that those willing to forge a new road will find a new kind of life, a new way of living that is life-affirming and life-giving, not only for us, but for all those around us as well. And it begins with this question, who are you? Who are you becoming? Who do you want to be? And are you willing to walk that road? Amen.